Hello, everybody. This is Alan Silva again. I just want to get. I gave you a discussion last. It's the last post. This is the post that I would like to concentrate on what I was trying to say, and but from a legal point of view. And so I went on research and I said, what was separate but equal? Well, I have this document in which we will hear a rendering it in speech, and you can see in the bottom.
Separate but equal was a legal doctrine in United States constitutional law according to which racial segregation did not violate the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution, adopted in 1868, which guaranteed equal protection under the law to all citizens. Under the doctrine, as long as the facilities provided to each race were equal, state and local governments could require that services, facilities, public accommodations, housing, medical care, education, employment, and transportation be segregated by race, which was already the case throughout the former Confederacy. The phrase was derived from the Louisiana law of 1890, although the law actually used the phrase equal but separate. 1. The doctrine was confirmed in the Plessy v. Ferguson Supreme Court decision of 1896, which allowed state-sponsored segregation. Though segregation laws existed before that case, the decision emboldened segregation states during the Jim Crow era, which had commenced in 1876 and supplanted the Black Codes, which restricted the civil rights and civil liberties of African Americans during the Reconstruction era. 17 states had segregation laws, which, in practice, the separate facilities provided to African Americans were rarely equal. Usually they were not even close to equal, or they did not exist at all. The doctrine was overturned by a series of Supreme Court decisions, starting with Brown v. Board of Education of 1954. However, the overturning of segregation laws in the United States was a long process that lasted through much of the 1950s, 1960s, and 1970s, involving federal legislation, especially the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and many court cases.
Now, if you understand that who benefit in the jazz community, or we say the music community, you understand? That means basically the Europeans and the Americans and the indigenous Americans. I say that the people who I say indigenous Americans, the people who are born in America. I mean, these people, like Du Bois, all these people, they're Americans. So why is that law define segregation? You understand? So we have to understand the social implications of the time. You understand? Why? I always ask myself that myself in the 1980s. If I looked that when I joined the NAACP, Thurman Marshall was the in charge of training nonviolent tactics. Or we decided to use the law. And that's a little different than any other group in the United States that had an unconstitutional law. And we needed to overcome that constitutional law in the terms of a constitutional change, simply because that was already a document that had gave a lot of rights to European Americans to do what they wanted to do. You understand? Even corporate America used that as a tactic. I'm not going against it. It's for my advantage. That's an indigenous American population that they decide that are not equal. Then that constitutes what? You understand? So I don't know where that's going. So you're thinking that the jazz community was one of the communities in which divide is separate but equal. At the same time, there were a lot of other musicians who didn't agree with that. You understand? That European Americans didn't fight this law, even in the music business. You know, that's 17 states having segregation laws. So Duke Ellington had to have a hotel. There were no hotels as equal to the white people or the European Americans. So who was going to build these hotels for who's going to build a hotel for only colored people? Only the black people or colored people or Americans had to invest in both hotels. You understand? Equally. And they didn't do that. Corporate America didn't do that. that was a big sign that, okay, you have separate facilities. That means, everybody's equal. Well, why is that? In fact, that's double money. I mean, it's not paying taxpayers' money. That's taxpayers' money used to separate people, but hey, that's taxpayers' money. So anybody wants to invest in a segregated hotel, they'll invest in a segregated hotel. They're not going to invest in another type of where only colored Americans could go. Who would invest in a colored American activity? So corporate Americans, backed up from that. So in the music business, I say because I was part of the music business, it's the same, So you had band leaders that you can't have an integrated band if it's 17 states. So the best thing you can do is have an all Afro-American band or an all-white band. I mean, so that's what we had from 1863 up until the 1960s. You know what I'm saying? When Miles Davis decided have an integrated band, there's not too many integrated bands on the history of the music. You understand? Arnett came to New York and had a white bass player, or a European, like Charlie Hayden. There's a lot. New York City, since New York City was not a segregated town, you understand? But in other places, these bands could not go and work in other places. New York City was not that way, you understand? So Charlie Hayden could work with that, maybe Los Angeles, but other states, not. That means that the limitation, you understand, that any record company had to sell a record in one town or another. Do you understand the economic implications that it has on the music industry? To have separate but equal record shops, or record shops only with black records? You see the difference I'm trying to say? So they corporate America decided that, it was in their advantage, Same with the movie industry, something like that. These were European people that had just come to America, basically. They had gone all the way back to the Civil War, already. So this is for me as an American in 1960 to have that kind of history on my head as an American. I had to change that. You understand? That was not kind of America I wanted to live in, and I wanted my kids not to live in that kind of stuff. I want my kids to have the right to do what they want to do within the area they want to work in, whatever that area might be. But don't make demeaning jobs as if they are not meaningless. We're all interconnected. Let's look at a music band. I mean, a venue, for instance, clubs that you work in, people that decide they want to open a jazz club or a club where you can play. You understand? This is for them a business. We knew that. If you're not, you're just, this is a business. I mean, we're here to sell alcohol and sell some music. At the same time, we're doing what we like to do. There's no infringement on our freedom to express ourselves in this club. This guy is saying, you can't play that kind of music in my club. No. He was a connoisseur of the music, and you came in there like people like Vanguard and people like these are people who love the music. They're here to help that music develop. So we worked in that kind of situation. So I have this. That's why I said a lot of people who are writing primarily on the 60s and so forth don't have to. You have to deal fundamentally as jazz historians, musicologists, the whole intellectual structure that's established from 1863, the whole intellectual concept established in science, established in education, everywhere. And you guys got a big benefit from that. Big benefit. Separate but equal. Yeah, okay. Don't give these people nothing. Don't keep it equal. So Wall Street, what does that mean? Oh, yeah, it's better for me to have it's more white people here than black people, so I better cater to them. That's not American, man. That's not what free enterprise was all about. You understand? So consequently, when you look at the music industry, especially this community that tried to establish that music community, they were all fundamentally Europeans who invested in this music, you know. When is the great American Columbia Records? You know, Columbia Records has been on the business a long time. One of the longest record labels, you know, catering to a broad American base, you understand? Keeping it separate but equal but broad base, you understand? So separatized companies like Blue Note Records and Atlantic Records and Prestige Records and so forth. These were all by European Americans who came here, especially that. Atlantic Records was a guy coming from Turkey, man. You understand? They were confronted with just dealing with that, you understand? So you have to look at the broad scope of that. So all that stuff about we were against this and we against, that's my own personal point of view. I mean, you can ask Bill Dixon or Cecil Taylor. These guys are really Americans. I mean, they were deprived, you know, separate, equal, deprived of a music career in America. You understand? Separate but equal. You know, audience separation. I mean, so only in states which didn't have segregated laws, you would see that music could find an audience that was more liberal, let's say. No, more American, in fact. To be an American is like Duke Ellington, man. you know, because he's an American. So European Americans decided they needed to promote their own shit by using the same concept. But that was separate but equal. Everybody agreed to that. The unions agreed to that, you know. So when did the musicians decide not to play segregated clubs? That would cut their financial losses. White bands said, no, we're not going to that state, you know. No. So there's a situation that you would place 60s when I arrived. I had a band that was integrated, you know, Burton Green, Gary Burton and Joel Simpson and myself and Clarence Walker, you know. I mean, Cecil Taylor had an integrated band, you understand. Archie didn't have. Paul Bley, you know, Carla Bley, who's integrated bands, you understand. You know, why is that? So the 60s was fundamentally, let's not stop the shit. You know, we're all doing the same thing, you know, different, and becoming American music. You understand? That's why American music is based, this art form is based on it being the music of our country. Now, other Europeans, Americans might think not. You know, they might admire for something else. You have to create, but that doesn't give you any, that gives you a right to do whatever kind of music you want to do, but it's American music. When I was going to, I think about going to Manhattan School of Music, I said, no, that's too much of European music. I want to learn American music. That's why I studied Alan Lomax. Because folk music, I felt, was a big area that a lot of people would not come into grips with, you know. Autodidactic musicians. For instance, when I was studying at how does Charlie Parker do what he did? Dizzy Gillespie, all these people. I was fascinated by their methodology, you understand, as a personal. But no musicologist was going down there to talk in Kansas City, talking to, well, let's go down and see what's going on, these guys are doing. No, they're studying European music, you understand. They're studying what's happening up at the symphony. They're not studying their own music. So that's a separate but equal situation too. You see, we had separate lawyers, the whole profession, they accepted that. Lock, stock, and barrel, you know. And I'm down to, and we ended up that. So in the 60s, we had to change that. I feel we had to change that. And the music industry needed to change. It needed to have a much more variety approach, even in New York City. I mean, Ed Sullivan had to change, man. What are you bringing on here? You got Latino Americans here playing music. You got a lot of different kinds. You got dance company. You got all kinds of culture in New York City. You understand? Why are you putting us with this one idea that's culture? You know? And I didn't go for that at all. You know, I was basically, until these people up there decide that they want to integrate, I'm staying in my own territory as an independent artist, making art for American people. You understand? Then I got global. You understand? Took my records and stuff, and there's people now around the world that likes my music. Thank you. You understand? I'm appreciative of that. You understand? But in the United States in 1960, trying to get an audience to listen to these bands was what I was interested in. You understand? Along with being a musician. You understand? At the same time, those were the issues. And so I'm going to sign off on that separate but equal. You can understand what I meant by reading the text under the bottom and see what we, now, if you're in America today, you know, there's a whole different kind of situation. You know, I mean, how many investors investing in new music? You have to invest. You know, how many new investors? You got people investing on the internet can't invest in new music. A country that can't invest in research and development of culture is, you know, yeah. It was amazing when I first came over to Europe and I played a big band piece at the ORTF. And they had to give the whole facilities was one of the most modern technological things because I like technology and I like recording studios. I was fascinated by the recording studio anyway. And be able to do seasons in Europe as opposed to not doing it in the States. No one in the States would do that, you know. But that record was out. And that was what my concept of what I thought that's called My Country. I did it, did the second piece, that was Seasons, and the second piece was My Country at the Royal Festival. I was commissioned to do 2 days. This means this concept of 3 hours of music and improvisation was my concept. It was a concept of Sun Ra too. It wasn't nothing new to me. It was like, how you can put up 2.5 hours with that much music on it? I mean, so you have some big bands come to and play 1 hour. Hey, well, you got all that talent on the stage. You know, you got great improvisers all there. We need 3 hours to do this. You know, so I mean, Beethoven wrote maybe 120 minutes. That's about all. We're talking about 190 minutes worth of music. You understand? So that's why that record stands as an idea that this music needs time. And I've always said that. So we're not looking for a hell of a lot of popularity here when I made that. But I hope that it is an intelligent idea about what integration can do. My band was integrated, Europeans and Americans, you understand? I wanted an integrated band. I didn't want no separate but equal band. You understand? So I'm not going to get any work in 1960 for a 30-piece band. You must be, and number one, I was only 20 years old. So I had to do a journeyman, you know, like, okay, I go join the Jazz Composers Guild and, you know, study with George Russell and, you know, move this concept up to what I wanted it to be. You understand? So from the freeform improvisation ensemble concept to 1969, that great idea, you know, of freedom, not necessarily freedom, but liberation. Let's say, let's liberate the music of the 60s. That's what we were speaking about, liberation of the music. Nobody had any problem with Marvin Gaye. Nobody had no problem with all these people. You know, I had no problems with the American musical establishment. I just wanted to be integrated, and I thought that we needed a more CBS, NBC needed to have a much broader scope on what they thought was going to entertain the American people. You understand? So you had y'all built them superstar British bands coming to America, bands that I really didn't think had the quality that was happening in the Afro-American music community as well as the other communities, you understand, to confront that with those people was separate but equal. I mean, they were living in their own dimension. So the jazz community or the improvised, I call the American jazz community, because if you decided to listen to John Coltrane and you're coming from Europe, you became American. We gave you the right to become an American, you know. because that's Ellington is American. That's my only contention. You understand? There's no such thing, in America as that. It's like people over here talking about European improvisation. Well, I mean, Europe has been involved in music for 300 fucking years. What do you mean, European improvisation? What are you talking about? It's like erroneous. Well, you all need to liberate your music. Well, you had the composers and you wrote them and the guys played them and you got a 100-piece orchestra. There's a bunch of individuals running around making something, you see. So I understand that we try to transport the composer relationship into a larger form, and we have failed, as a society. That's my contention. I'm 77, but I'm retired. I'm not in the field. I give this as a idea of what segregation can do, how dangerous it is for the music business and for the art business. I mean, in America. Americans need to think of themselves as individuals. Jackson Pollock is an individual. John Coltrane is an individual. Alice Coltrane. These are all great Americans, man. And a whole bunch of other people that I don't know, too, that are great Americans, I wouldn't say. As long as you're trying to write something for American people to enjoy or learn from, which is another thing. Is music a learning experience or is it entertainment? You understand? I always thought music was learning. If I wanted to be entertained, that is still an intelligent idea too. There's nothing wrong with being an entertainer at all. I have no problem with that at all. Writing music for dance music, that's not as broad as it can. So we had all these people, Euros, trying to, set up different kinds of equality situations. Now, I listen to classical music. What do you mean you listen to classical music? What does that mean? It's a bunch of, it's erroneous statements. I didn't like. And the press used that. They made journalism out of it. And I'm cutting off.